Welcome to Really Old Movies. I'm your host Harrison Scullin, and today with my cousin Carter, we'll be discussing The Searchers from 1956, starring John Wayne and directed by John Ford. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Scullin, and today I got a very special guest, my cousin Carter. So, how's it going, Carter?
Great. Yeah, excited to be here again.
Yeah, and if you watched us last season, he was on with us for Rio Bravo, or was it Rio Grande? One of those
Rio
two.
Grande, yeah.
Yeah, I get them mixed up, both of the Rios.
Hmm.
And today we'll be discussing The Searchers, which is another John Wayne, John Ford film. And before we get started, why don't you kind of introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, my name's Carter. I'm one of Harrison's cousins, and I'm going into psychology, but I've had a long time fan of different movies and movie trivia, and I really enjoy coming on to really old movies whenever I get the chance.
Yeah, no, it's always fun to have you on. And, I always think about when we were kids, how we'd watch movies all the time at your guys' house and at my house, especially movies like The Dark Crystal and all of that.
Right. Classics.
Oh, such a good film. But today, talking about The Searchers, before we kind of talk about our thoughts, what's your initial impressions and kind of experience with this film?
Yeah, this was actually my second time seeing it. I'd seen it a few years ago, and it's out of the John Wayne movies that I've seen, it's probably my favorite one of his, tied with El Dorado. So in that sense, I really like The Searchers and enough to rewatch it.
Nice. Yeah, and kind of before we got started, you talked a little bit how you're watching it with my brother Hunter. He's also been on the show several times too. So, how was that experience for you guys?
It was good. Yeah. Hunter's also really into older movies and movies in general. So it was fun to sit down and watch it with him last weekend. And I'm not sure, I think talking to him, the only other John Wayne movie he'd seen was True Grit. So for him, it was kind of another way to see John Wayne. Not exactly the same type of characters. Like he plays a cowboy both times, but I would say that his character in The Searchers is a lot more brutalistic, which is crazy because in True Grit, he's also a pretty seasoned cowboy. And
Yeah, no, totally, I agree. Rooster Cogburn, he's crazy, but in this film, he seems even more of a rogue and more of a like beats to his own drum type guy.
right. Yeah. Afterwards, it was also fun. Hunter plugged in Red Dead Redemption 2. So we played probably for like an hour, just kind of get into that cowboy vibe. So that was a good follow up.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've totally been on a cowboy streak since watching this movie.
Really, that's awesome.
I've been listening to a bunch of the music from this movie and other ones, so I same bow. I've been listening to a lot of cowboy stuff too.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, and for me, this was my first time actually watching it. I think this is my fifth or sixth John Wayne film.
Oh wow.
Um, I've seen like Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I've seen one called McClintock, another one called Stagecoach. That's one of his earlier ones, and then a bunch of his war movies too. So this is one that has been on my watch list forever, right? Because this one, people say it's the best Western of all time or one of the best
Really?
movies of all time. So, yeah,
Did you've seen True Grit too then, right?
I have seen True Grit as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. So I was excited to watch it because, again, it's one, at least in the movie community and amongst film fans, people talk about this movie all the time.
Hmm.
So I was really eager and excited to check it out.
I didn't know it was that famous. I understood that. I think the way I stumbled across it originally was just kind of like a top 10 John Wayne films, but I didn't know it also held a high place just amongst Western films in general. But it makes sense considering he's one of the most accomplished Western actors.
Absolutely. I want to say he was in over 300 movies or something like that. Like,
Yeah,
he's definitely one of the more accomplished ones for sure. Yeah. And so I think now we could kind of get started talking about our thoughts on the film. So let's start with the plot. What were your thoughts on the plot, and what would you give it on a scale of 1 to 5?
I initially I rated it a 4. In terms of a Western film, I feel like this is a plot that's pretty easy to follow, right? It's just um, Ethan Edwards and Marty are on essentially a journey to recover Ethan's niece. Yes, his niece,
Mhm. Yeah.
Debbie. And that's pretty much it. And it's just their kind of adventures along the road and the lengths that they go to and kind of their desperation and their determination just unfolds over the course of the length of the film. And in that sense, the plot's very simple, but sometimes simplicity is favorable. There are a lot of different events that happen, but none of them
Yeah.
are. They all. It feels like a really natural progression where they just have different clues that kind of help them, different trading posts, different rumors they follow up on, all over the course of the movie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In that way, it kind of reminded me of True Grit, because in that one too, they're trying to find uh what was his name? Cheney, I think that was his last
Oh,
name.
I couldn't tell you. Yeah.
The guy who killed the girl's dad, right? They're trying to
Hmm.
find him. So same thing. It's kind of like a investigation and almost a quest, a mythical quest they're on.
Right. And I think it speaks a lot. We'll talk to the directing later, but just to how naturally everything flows. Like I didn't feel like there were any scenes that just came out of nowhere. All of it was plausible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and for me, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I didn't. I liked it. I was not a huge fan of how it was executed.
Mm.
I love the idea of the film, right? I love this idea of this kind of mythical quest, like I was saying. But to me, I thought some of the elements going on, like they have this whole subplot of uh
Oh, I was wondering
Marty,
what you thought about that.
of Marty and these different women and whatnot. I wasn't a huge fan of that. I think that could have been cut.
Right.
Um,
That's probably my biggest qualm with the film is that whole wedding scene subplot is just really random, and I'm not sure how much it really adds to the story other than
yeah.
a little bit of comedy.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't serve any real purpose. I mean, barely, right? Like the I don't remember her name, but his Comanche wife, right? She ends up finding the
Oh, look, they call her Look.
yeah, look. I guess she ends up finding the camp for them, but even still, they don't find Debbie there, right? She's already moved on, so that could have been totally cut out, in my opinion.
Hmm. And then all the scenes with what's her name? Oh, what's the name? Lori, right?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
Lori. Especially her character. I'm not sure what they were going for other than to just have a little bit of comedy in there and another female actress.
yeah. It kind of feels like a different film. It almost feels like a screwball comedy or a romance movie with those scenes in it. And to me, totally detract from this whole quest of them trying to find Debbie.
Mm.
Let's
Yeah,
see.
I'll agree with you there. Those scenes were definitely out of place.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I thought the ending was a bit rushed too. I mean, this whole time we're talking about Scar, we're talking about all these guys, and the fight wasn't that big of a fight. I wanted more. I wanted
Yeah,
more gun action. It just seemed a little lackluster compared to how much time, how much buildup, because it's about almost 2.5 hours long of them talking
yeah.
about this. So I thought the payoff was pretty disappointing too.
Anticlimactic. Yeah, especially compared to some of his final fights in other movies, which is long drawn out gunfights, whereas Scar in this one, he just gets blown away by Marty almost off screen.
Yeah, and almost instantly. So no, I was pretty disappointed with that. And this will kind of go into acting too, but to me, I like the dynamic between Ethan and the preacher reverend captain guy,
Mm.
because he's like more of the straight man, more of the lawman, whereas Ethan's more of the rogue. I thought their dynamic would have been much, much more interesting. Their different approaches of trying to find Debbie. I think that would have been way better of a story than what we got here.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that they had all of those other Texas Rangers that were kind of introduced at the beginning, and then they disappear for most of the movie just to come back right at the end. And
Yeah,
I feel like the scenes that is specifically that character's in, they're good ones. So I guess that is disappointing that he wasn't in it more.
yeah. So, anyways, I liked the idea of it. I just wasn't a huge fan of how it was executed.
Mm.
All right. So, since we're kind of talking about it, let's talk about the acting. What are your thoughts on the acting?
I thought John Wayne did an excellent job. He plays this character who's kind of, in a lot of ways, he's very violent and he's very prejudiced. You can tell he does not like Native Americans or Comanches
Yeah.
specifically, which I think one of the things I remember reading about this film is that it's one of the best portrayals of kind of the relationship between cowboys and Native Americans. So today it feels very uncomfortable, right? He sounds very racist the way he approaches the other Native Americans, but I think they also do a great job of, I mean, even from the first scene, he calls out Marty for being like brown, and he
Right,
just,
right.
yeah, just out of nowhere, kind of just establishing that this guy does not like Indians, and we never really find out why that is originally. He had a lot of reason after the Comanche tribe attacks his family, but not before then. And at the same time, so we have the Native Americans who are very violent and they're scalping people and kidnapping women. And then we
Yeah.
also have some who are operating a trade post and they're very kind. And we have Look and her tribe. So I think it's an interesting film where we get to see kind of the classic racist portrayal of Native Americans as very violent. And then you also get this peaceful portrayal. So I just think in that sense, there's a lot of nuance to that portrayal of Native Americans, even though I dislike that Scar is played by not a Native American. I think that's
Oh.
the one place that they messed that aspect up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they cast who they could, right? But I agree. I think they could have picked someone who really was Native American. That probably would have been much better.
Right. He doesn't look Native American at all.
No, he looks like your average Joe. Tom, Dick, or Harry, right?
Yeah. What did you think about the acting?
I liked it as well. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really liked John Wayne. I think this is one of his best roles. And I remember reading about kind of the behind the scenes of this. He considered it so much so he named his son Ethan. Like he
Oh.
loved this character so much. So I agree with that. I love that. I did not like the actor who played Marty or
Mm.
Martin, whatever his name was. I thought he was a bit whiny and a bit hammy. And again, I really loved the Reverend actor played by Ward Bond. I don't know if you've ever seen like It's a Wonderful Life or movies like that. He's in that.
Oh, is
He's
he
in
really?
tons of movies. Yeah, he plays the cab driver.
Okay. I'll have to keep an eye out for him.
Yeah, he's in a lot of them. And I was looking at his filmography, kind of as a side note. I've seen him in 11 movies, but I didn't realize he's in all these
Huh.
movies.
This is why we have to come to the scholar.
Yeah.
You've seen all these old movies now, so you can kind of pick up on these people who show up all over the place.
Yeah. It makes you realize, too, oh, there really weren't that many actors back then. They keep
Hmm.
showing up in the same things.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's the cool thing about dropping into an older movie like this is that there are all these people who I'm guessing at the time were kind of household names. I mean, I expect at least one of the two main female actresses, whether that was Laurie or Debbie,
Yeah.
were
Well,
probably famous actresses for the time, and I just don't know them from anything.
yeah. Well, actually, speaking of that, Debbie was played by Natalie Wood,
Hmm,
who's in West Side Story. She's in The Great Race. Uh,
really?
yeah, she was much more popular in the 60s because in this movie, she's kind of in her teenage years, I think.
Hmm.
But yeah, again, another one that was kind of a household name too. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I overall though, I did give this movie a 3.5 just because I thought John Wayne was excellent. Everyone else was just kind of okay.
Yeah.
At least out of the main cast of characters, I thought Scar was pretty mediocre. Marty
Yeah.
was all right.
No, I agree. Uh, I think my favorite is still Ward Bond as the Reverend Captain guy.
Hmm.
He's like, "Are you speaking to me as the Reverend or as the Captain?" He's like, "As your friend."
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. All right. So let's go into directing. What are your thoughts on directing?
I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 just because I I don't know a lot about John Ford's work, to be honest. I just felt like there were just a few odd choices in the movie. I like the story a lot. I won't detract from the plot score that I gave, but it just seemed like there were some weird decisions here and there.
Hmm.
And I think those can be traced back to him, whether that was including things like the wedding subplot between Marty and Laurie and their whole brawl, as well as just some of the, I mean, you mentioned earlier, like kind of the anticlimactic final fight. I think there are a few decisions that were a little odd.
Hmm. No, I definitely agree. I liked it a little bit more. I gave it a 4 out of 5. You know, I think he's really good at setting up really interesting scenes, and he's really known for his character dynamics. I we'll talk a little bit about in cinematography, but just his use in the Monuments Valley was really really cool. And but to me, I don't know if you've seen Man Who Shot Liberty Valance,
I
but
haven't.
I highly recommend that one. Is my favorite John Wayne and John Ford film.
Hmm.
That to me shows much better of his chops, both of their acting and directing chops. It's got great cinematography and characters, and I think an even better John Wayne. But this movie, I think, from John Ford shows okay, he's kind of, I would say, kind of starting to retire from doing westerns because he's been doing movies since the teens, I want to say. So about
Wow.
40 years at this point, right? So this kind of felt like almost like a sunset film where he's like, okay, I've been doing this a million times, right? So I don't know. To me, it didn't feel like his best work. It felt like he was like, yeah, just another, I don't know what you would call it, but just another film of the week, that wasn't his best work, in my opinion.
Hmm. Seeing that's a perspective I don't really have, so it's interesting to hear your comments on that.
Yeah. So I highly recommend checking out Man Who Shot Liberty Valance if you want to see the best John Ford film, at least right now, because I think he made like 200 movies. So of the
Wow.
10 I've seen by him, that one's my favorite. But again, right? Back in this era, they weren't trying to make the best movie ever. They were just, okay, let's get together. Here's the script. Here's the film. Let's just get it out the door. And every once in a while, one would strike, like lightning would strike. And oh, wow, this one was really popular. Okay, we'll keep doing it like this way. And
Hmm.
it's not like today where everyone's like, oh, this is going to be the best movie of all time, right? Like the Marvel movies or Star Wars, right? They're trying too hard, I think, in my opinion. This, they couldn't care less, right? It was a job, right? So,
Hmm. A lot. So there was a lot less writing on each individual film. I think I had read that there are more movies or less movies coming out now than ever, right? That it's just kind of comparatively, they're just the production has shrunk and budgets
oh,
have
absolutely.
increased.
Absolutely. Because back in this day, I mean, the studio system, right? They literally would churn out each studio like 3 or 4 movies every week. You know,
Hmm.
so just the fact that today we're lucky if we get 1 or 2 good ones a year. So
Right.
it's very different today than it was back then.
Hmm. Interesting.
But anyways, anything else you want to add to the directing?
No, I think I'm ready to talk about cinematography and special effects.
All right, let's hear your thoughts on that.
I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I loved all of the filming that they, as far as I could tell, did on location in, I don't know, southern Utah, Arizona, Monument Valley. It was really impressive, and
Mhm.
I loved a lot of the shots, especially the wide shots where you got to see them hiking or riding through the different areas.
Yeah.
And yeah, in terms of special effects, I thought they were great too. I commented to Hunter while we were watching it, specifically during the this was towards the beginning of the movie when Ethan, Marty, and the other Texas Rangers were holding off the Native Americans that were trying to cross. They were shooting at them. You saw them falling in the river.
Yeah.
One guy straight up got like trampled, and I was like, that guy actually got like crushed by a horse, and they put it in the movie. Like these aren't special effects. This is actually as real as it gets, and I think that's kind of a testament to movies of that era where they were really out there, maybe not always in the safest conditions, and it was really impressive in my opinion. And I think it looks great because of it. I also really liked this kind of combined cinematography and special effects, but there was one in the final fight, which as short as it was, there was one shot where they were charging on their horses and the camera was sliding along with them. I thought that shot was
Yeah.
really impressive.
Yeah, I agree. That was a really cool scene.
So I give it 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5. All right. Well, I give it a 5 out of 5. I
Oh,
agree with a
nice.
lot what you said. I mean, the Monuments Valley scenes were so cool, and I saw it on friggin' VHS, and it looked
Oh, really?
amazing. Yeah,
That's
it looked,
awesome.
it looked so good, especially the scenes at Ethan's brother's house. I
Hmm.
mean, beautifully put together, and especially the opening and ending shot were really good uh bookends. I loved it. So cool. And you could tell some of the scenes were on a stage, right? Like when was his name Futterman or something like that was chasing them. That scene I think was on a stage, but
Right.
for the most part, like you were saying, this was outdoors. Like they were really out in the desert. They were really
Yeah.
chasing each other on horses. It was awesome.
Yeah. I feel like that's something that you don't see anymore. Everything's done with CGI and green screens, or even The Mandalorian, I think, is famous for kind of piloting that new, like, do you know the name of it where there's like a wraparound screen that they
Oh,
project environments on?
yes, the volume. Mhm.
Right. So there's just all these different things they do, and I think there's something that can be said of actually being on location.
Absolutely. And the scene you were mentioning about the guy getting trampled, it kind of reminded me. Have you seen Stagecoach at all?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, a few years ago.
yeah, remember when the stagecoach, they're being chased by the Indians, and then John Wayne's character's like climbing around the horses and then goes under the stagecoach? Like they actually did that.
Really? I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to rewatch that scene. That's crazy.
uh, Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of pays homage to it when Indy's going underneath the
Yeah.
the truck. Yeah.
Is that really? That's what that is. Okay. See, there's a movie I've seen tons of times over the years, and Stagecoach I've just seen the one time.
Oh, okay.
So that's cool. Yeah, you see that in a lot of films.
Absolutely. It's just a testament again to John Ford's special effects and stunt work. I mean, well, he didn't do the stunts, but his willingness to have his actors go through all that.
Yeah,
So,
and coordinate it,
right.
especially. Yeah.
Yeah. Really cool stuff.
And I think also just to set up the cameras to actually capture the stunts. I don't think they had the nice mobile cameras we've got these days. So the fact that they were
No,
able to get these shots, I think, is also impressive.
absolutely. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he was on a horse too or something as well,
Hmm.
right? Because it's not like they have all the rigging like we do today, right?
You don't think they set up? Because I was trying to think how they would have done that scene. Like they would have had to lay down tracks and have like some cart just
They
speeding
must have.
along fast enough to keep up with these galloping horses.
Maybe, or like those old like train cars. Maybe they had something like
Hmm.
that too, or I guess there's like those dolly camera things, but still, like it was impressive what they did here.
I agree.
Yeah. So that to me is probably the highlight of the film, and probably the sole reason why I would recommend it is the amazing cinematography and special effects here. So yeah. All right. So lastly, what are your thoughts on the music?
For music, I wrote 3.5 again. I didn't particularly notice it being amazing, but it also served a lot of purposes in the film, whether it was violins or drums or just different, what I would just consider classic Western music. And maybe it's just that the Western music has become so stereotypical after years and years and years that I'm not able to piece apart what's good and isn't. So I'm
Mhm.
curious to hear what your thoughts were on the music compared to some of the other Western films that you've seen.
Sure. I gave it a 4 out of 5. The reason being not necessarily the score or music, but the song that we hear at the beginning at the end. So introducing us to Ethan and then him going away. It's called "Ride Along."
Hmm.
It's like the it kind of sounds like music from Toy Story 2, where it's
Oh
like
yeah,
the "Ride along the sun."
yeah,
I really liked that song. In fact, I listened to it probably 3 or 4 times since watching the movie.
really.
I
Okay,
really like that song.
I'll have to listen, give it a listen again.
Yeah, just that shot of John Wayne, or I guess Ethan, looking at his family and he's like, "All right, my job here is done." And he looks away. Then the door closes on him with that song. I loved it. It was so good.
That was a cool final shot. I wanted to comment on that earlier, but just the framing I thought was impressive.
Yeah, I agree too. That's probably one of my favorite scenes, and that music to me really elevates that scene as well, because it
Hmm.
gives it like a mythical feel to it, right? Like he's a former soldier. This cowboy comes into town, goes through this adventure, and then he's moving on to the next one, right?
Right.
Very, very much like I don't know, like Star Trek or Wagon Train. Like the event of the week, right? So then tune in next week, and he's I don't know in Arizona or something like that, right?
Right.
It kind of gave that impression to me.
Yeah, I liked his character. I thought was definitely the highlight of the movie.
Definitely, I agree. This to me, I don't know if my favorite one is still his portrayal in Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, but I think this is top three for sure because I just love his character arc. Like after a while, you're like, does he still really want to keep doing this, or is it more out of pride and ego? Like is he really wanting to save his niece? I love
Or
that.
you're wondering if he's going to make the right decision in the end. You see him do like a few unhinged things throughout the movie, and then he almost kills her just because of
Yeah,
how native she's gone. And then I guess in the end, he makes the right decision and saves her.
yeah, because Marty's like Jason's like, don't kill her, and then you think he's about to kill her, then he picks her up. He's like, let's go home, Debbie. It's like, oh,
Right.
so good.
Yep. That seems great.
Yeah. So I love the music. I love the character arcs, and so let's get on to our final score. So, what's your final score for this film?
I would give it a 4 out of 5. It's my favorite John Wayne film that I've seen so far, and I need to go on Letterboxd and actually write that down.
Yeah.
I listed it. I have a list of John Wayne films that I've seen. I just haven't gone through and reviewed this one officially yet.
Oh, nice. Well, then I think I already know the answer to this. Would you recommend this movie to other people?
I'm gonna have to go with yes, especially because a year ago when we were talking about movies that we'd want to review together, I said, "Hey, we should review this one. I liked it
Yeah.
when I saw it." Oh, yes, I would recommend it. I think I would recommend it with the caveat of you need to have seen another John Wayne film first, just to kind of appreciate. Because I think all of his movies together kind of create this almost legendary persona of John Wayne just embodies this cowboy. And so if you've only seen one movie of his, he just doesn't come across as impressive as if you because he's almost always playing these really experienced characters.
Mhm.
And if you've seen all of these John Wayne films, it's very believable, right? He's always fighting people and riding throughout the West. So when you view this film where he's playing another experienced character and you've seen other John Wayne movies, I think together it makes for a good experience.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to disagree with you there. I also gave it a 4 out of 5. A lot of his movies, especially in the earlier days, like Stagecoach and whatnot, he's kind of more, I would say, like the straight hero, like, straight as an arrow, maybe a little sarcastic and whatnot. But this movie and Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, we kind of see a little bit of a different side to him where he's not, he's more of an anti hero than he is a full fledged hero
Right.
where like the Punisher, right? He kind of beats to his own drum and kind of makes his own rules. He has his own moral code, but it sometimes is not what everybody else would consider moral. So I love that to him too. It shows he was a good actor.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely a darker role, I would say, compared to some of his other ones. I think you
Yeah.
hit that you explained that very well.
They can't. Yeah. So I would also recommend this movie. I still think The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is a much better film. And I think his best performance, hands down, at least of all the movies I've seen with him so far. But I would still recommend this. And like Carter was saying, I recommend checking out his other films too. So you could kind of see kind of his range. Because I've heard many people say, again, in the film community, people are a little crazy, right? But who say John Wayne wasn't a good actor. Like, I don't know. He seemed to have range, like I've seen.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
Yeah. I mean, he was recognized for his contribution to cinema, but I don't know. To me, he for sure could be seen as a typecast actor. I mean, he did 200 Westerns or whatever it was, right? But this to me shows he had range. He was actually a good actor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really enjoy John Wayne in almost everything I've seen him. Not the movies aren't always that great, but I think he's always a highlight in whatever film he's in.
Yeah, absolutely. He just has this presence to him, right?
Right.
This charisma. He's like, sit down there, partner. Or
That'll be the day.
Yeah, that was my favorite line. That'll be the day.
Yep.
That added a little humor to it too that I really appreciated. Because it's a pretty dark story if you think about it.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I wonder if that's why they thought they needed to include the Marty's love life subplot, but
maybe
these days they wouldn't. These days they'd like double down on the greediness and the darkness, and you would have seen Marty's aunt's body or whatever. So that was another thing that I appreciated, is that they were able to imply most of the atrocities that occurred.
Absolutely, yeah. Like where he said, well, you want me to spell it out for you?
Right.
I love that. Because you don't have to be gratuitous, you could they could talk, they didn't even really say what happened, but you could just feel it. You could kind of get the implication of what did happen too.
Exactly.
I think her name's Lucy. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing I love about old movies too, is, because of the Hays Code, and some people hate it, some people love it, whatever. They couldn't show gratuitous stuff, so they found creative ways around that and not having to be explicit. And I love that, in my opinion. So
another thing that I like about this movie is that it doesn't really hold your hand. They just kind of drop you right into the middle of these people's lives, and
yeah,
you're kind of confused about, like, how does Marty fit into this, or like, why is he helping these people that he's not related to, or what was Ethan doing before he came out west? So it's just, I appreciate that you kind of discover things about them throughout the movie rather than just having like their whole backstory explained in one monologue right at the beginning.
Right. No, I agree too, because that happens too often now. And we get origin stories all the time, and all. We don't need that. Like, give us enough to where we're still interested, but not so much to where we're overwhelmed. Right. I love the subtlety. So no, I agree with that too.
Yeah, you get to meet, it's kind of like you're meeting a new person. Like initially you just have your first impressions of them and you don't understand all their mannerisms, and
Right.
as you spend more time with them you come to understand them better, which I think is a more realistic view of life, as opposed to, like you said, modern films where you get their whole backstory, their whole hero origin story from the start.
Yeah. It's not always necessary. Sometimes it is. Most of the time it isn't. So yeah. All right. Well, those are our thoughts on The Searchers from 1956. And before we go, Carter, why don't you kind of, I know you don't have a channel or anything, but why don't you kind of plug or say any last words?
Yeah, I have a Letterboxd. Harrison was nice to introduce it to me. I believe my name on there is Cartology, so kind of just a play on my name. And I really enjoy coming onto really old movies whenever I can, and I recommend that you subscribe and follow for more great content.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And I'll have links to his Letterbox down below. He's got some interesting reviews. Like, I love your Phantom Menace one. I think you gave a 5 out of 5.
Yep. First movie I ever saw. 2 weeks old.
That's crazy. That might have been one of the first movies I saw too, or that or Bug's Life. I can't remember which, but
oh yeah. My dad said I slept through the whole thing. So.
So slept through it. Great nap. 5 out of 5.
Right. Well, I had nothing to compare it to, so there you go.
Oh, that's funny. But yeah, make sure to follow him too, guys, and make sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Really Old Movies, where I share behind-the-scenes details about each week's particular film. And new episodes are released Saturdays at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and video versions on YouTube and Rumble Mondays at 7 p.m. And with that, this has been Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Scullin. This is my guest, Carter. Take care.